Willie Green might not be on the hot seat to start the season, but he should be on the hot seat to start the season. I'll tell you why in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, plus some injury news. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Thursday, a game day for your New Orleans Pelicans as they take on the Orlando Magic. We'll recap that in tomorrow's show, but we got a lot to cover. I want to look at Willie Green. Is he on the hot seat? Is he not? And I'm going to tell you why, no matter what, he should be, and why it's actually not for the reasons that you think. Plus, Kevon Looney was injured. We'll break that down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everyday. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single weekday at 10:30 a.m. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So let's get right into this one. You know, this topic came to me as I was reading rankings, starting with Tom Ziller and his Good Morning It's Basketball newsletter, which I really love. And that is where he ranked all of the coaches on the hot seat. And Willie Green came in at number 3. This is also kind of like solidified by CBS Sports and Sam Quinn ranking all of the head coaches 1 through 30. Willie Green coming in at 24. So like just outside of being at the bottom here. I want to read what they both have to say about head coach Willie Green, because look, I truthfully don't know if Willie Green's actually on the hot seat or not. It seems like he has a very good relationship with Joe Dumars. Willie Green, at times, hear me out on this one, has been dealt a bad hand, so many injuries. How can we actually know if he's a good head coach or not? But I'm going to tell you why, despite all that, he should be on the hot seat. So here's what Tom Ziller has to say. Quote, "I am on the record writing that the Pelicans could be pretty good. However, if not, it's hard to imagine Willie Green surviving the season. He's had 4 years in New Orleans and a lot of tumult around him, from David Griffin saying things most GMs wouldn't say, to Zion Williamson doing things most star players wouldn't do, to some wild trades. And now he's a new boss in Joe Dumars. If history is a guide, New Orleans probably has to be at 500 or better, has to be at 500 in December for Green to avoid getting bounced here. The thing is, I think Green's a good coach who will get another job in a better resource situation pretty quickly. James Borrego is Green's associate head coach. He's been a head coach twice in the NBA and is broadly seen as someone who will get another head coaching shot." End quote. Here's what Sam Quinn has to say. Quote, "Willie Green deserves some measure of sympathy. He's had a healthy team for, 3 months? The Pelicans were good during that brief stretch of the 23-24 season. Otherwise, injuries have doomed his tenure in New Orleans. Still, he hasn't helped matters lately. The Pelicans never shoot threes. That was true even when they had the NBA's best shooting coach in Fred Vinson. He never quite figured out how to get Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram to coexist, and a lot of their bad habits persisted under his watch. It seems notable that the Pelicans did not allow James Borrego to interview as an associate head coach for the Knicks this offseason. They were under no obligation to. It would have been a lateral move, and there's no defined industry standard on that front, but teams will reasonably often allow assistants to move in the best interests of their career, and Borrego could have sold himself as a future head coach far more easily on a winning Knicks team than he will be on the rebuilding Pelicans. Yet the Pelicans held on to Borrego. It's hard not to read that as the Pelicans wanted to keep a potential interim coach or even permanent replacement in the building." End quote. Both those say Willie Green has had things outside of his control that could potentially be holding him back. And I do truthfully agree with that. I don't actually know if we've ever seen how good Willie Green could be. But when you watched the third quarter against Houston on Tuesday night, and it was just like, that immediate surge by Houston to get a 17-point lead, looking like there was no plan, some weird lineups out there that just make no sense. Jose Alvarado and Jeremiah Fears, you can't play those two together. You had bad half-court offense where it was just at times Herb Jones isolation three-pointers, which it should just never be. Just no plan, right? It brought back all of the stuff of oh man, we're just doing this all again, aren't we? It's just all the same again, and we're kind of tired of seeing that. That's the reason why, even if Willie Green isn't actually on the hot seat, he should be. This team, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the third segment too when we get into Kevon Looney's injury, you just can't keep running it back. You can't keep doing the same thing. And Joe Dumars said that. And they're taking a bit of a different approach here. But it goes beyond you just can't keep running it back. This is about something that I've been hammering. It's about perception. You need to show that you care. You being, whether it's Gail Benson, whether it's Joe Dumars, whether it's just everyone kind of associated with the team, you have to show that not making the playoffs consistently is not okay. You do that by making moves, even if they're a little bit drastic. They need to change the perception about how people view this team. Immediately in that third quarter on social media and even on the comments here on YouTube, people are just oh, this is the same thing all over again. Nothing's ever going to change. Even if things are actually different, you don't want people thinking that. You don't want your fan base thinking about that at all. But that is something that is just kind of out there. That's not great. You need to change the perception around this team. So if you are 500 or worse, right, you have to make a change. You have to do something that says being mediocre and just making the play-in tournament isn't enough for this franchise. That's not what we want for our fans. You have to do something different. So even if Willie Green is a good coach, and Tom Ziller seems to think he is, right? You have to make that determination that it's just not working here. We have to do something differently. This is not about, the human aspect should factor into this. Don't get me wrong, it should. But at the same point, you got to win basketball games. This is a results-oriented business. And for whatever reasons, most don't have to do with head coach Willie Green. It just hasn't quite worked from what we wanted to see. So you've got to make things different here. And so I've been saying I would be using the in-season tournament, the NBA Cup, as the measuring stick. If you make the quarterfinals of that, so if you get out of the knockout stages, good. That's what I want to see from this team. Though you're playing against good teams. You got the Lakers, the Clippers, and I think the Mavs in there too in their group. If you get out of that group, that's saying something. The Lakers and Clippers are projected to be playoff teams. The Mavs are kind of somewhere in the Pelicans range, maybe a little bit above them. So if you're winning those games and you kind of go on a bit of a run there, all right, it shows that you're competing with some of those top teams. If you're 500, you don't have a first round pick next year. You've got to at least do something to try and get a little bit more juice out of this team here. And so you're going to need to make a change. This was one of the reasons why they brought James Borrego in to help with the offense and things. And you haven't seen it really work out. Look, I don't know if Brandon Ingram and Zion could coexist, but you didn't really see some things that you wanted to see there. And I'll get into the Brandon Ingram situation in the next segment because I do think that criticism is a little bit unfair against head coach Willie Green. But you got to try and win. Even if it's not actually playoffs or bust this year for New Orleans, you have to try and do that. And so you need to make a change. So even if Willie Green isn't on the hot seat, and again, I don't exactly know if he is or not. We thought he would be last year, and they didn't make a change. Thought he could be the year before that. They didn't make a change. So if that's going to be, whether he is or not, he should be, because if you don't get off to the start that you want, you're just telling your fans this is just how it is, and you can't have people believing in that. You need to instill that people care. And I know that everyone cares about this franchise. I talk to those folks. They do. You also need to do things that show it. And it even might be making a move just to make a move, or a change just to make a change, to kind of hammer that point home. Simple as that. So Willie Green, and again, not a knock on him as a person, needs to be on the hot seat because the perception around this franchise right now is not good, and they need to do something to try and change that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the third segment as we look at Kevon Looney's injury, and then we'll look at also some of the other impacts of that on the team here. So we've just talked a lot about Willie Green, But let's be positive here, right? I know a lot of y'all are going to be in there being like, they should have fired him this offseason. They should fire him before the season started. It shouldn't wait. He needs to be on the hot seat. Sure. Let's look at some positives with it. I do think there are signs that coaching and stuff like that is going to be different this year. I'll explain what I mean. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here. The NBA season is about to start, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and you're going to get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5, and if it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it gives you so many different ways to play. You can build parlays, you can try player props, which are always fun, even follow the games live because the lines are always being updated. So it just makes watching sports a little bit more fun when you've got something riding on the action. So whether you're a casual fan or you love just deep dives into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And you're going to get started with $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins over at FanDuel.com and the FanDuel app. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're not an everydayer, it's okay. If you listen one day a week, just try listening 2. You don't need to make the jump to 5, but put Locked On Pelicans in your daily rotation. And however you listen, whenever you listen, how frequently you listen, I appreciate you making Locked On Pelicans part of your day in any capacity. So let's keep talking about head coach Willie Green. I said he should be on the hot seat. If you remember last year, I think after like game 1 or 2, I was like, I think they need to make a change here. I said that like early on. I had a couple people from the team come up to me being like, Jake, what are you doing? And I was like, I stand by what I said. I wouldn't have put it out there if I didn't actually believe it. There are some signs, though. You know, part of that is you just haven't seen the growth from Willie Green that you'd like to see. You've seen some, but there's more growth that you'd like to see from him. You know, like players, sometimes coaches, you know, it's not always linear with growth, and it takes a little bit. We've seen guys get fired and become really good head coaches later on. You know, that could be the same for head coach Willie Green. It's not just you get a little bit better every year. Sometimes there's up, there's downs, and then there's a big spike or what have you. You know, I think you can see some changes already, some signs that things are going to be different with head coach Willie Green this coming season. And one of the things, actually, it's funny because I saw this in the comments right before recording the show. We talked about Jeremiah Fears in yesterday's show. Really good game, 20 points, 15 shot attempts against the Houston Rockets. He looked good. There has been a concerted effort to play him a lot in preseason so far. He seems to be high up in the rotation already. That doesn't always happen with head coach Willie Green. You know, it seemed like Trey Murphy's season when he was a rookie was kind of already predefined. Herb Jones carved out a role, but Trey Murphy, despite being better and just more impactful than players in front of him in the rotation, like couldn't get in front of those guys. We've seen Willie Green just kind of randomly almost like demote Trey at other times too, where, you know, he took him out of the starting lineup. Remember, it was like around Mardi Gras, the All-Star break. He'd been starting. They took him out. The All-Star break hit. They took him out of the starting lineup for 3 games, and they immediately went 0-3 before you put him back in. And it was just a very confusing thing. You know, it does seem like sometimes Willie Green just kind of predetermines, like, this is my guy, this isn't my guy. And, you know, rookies, when a coach is under pressure, right? If he's on the hot seat, it means he needs to win games. Rookies don't tend to win you games. This is why that 2 timelines approach that I've been talking about, win now versus developing the young guys, there's a reason it doesn't work anywhere in the NBA. You haven't seen it fully work out, and it's difficult to pull off. So Willie Green might not want to play these young guys because he wants to win and maybe he trusts somebody else over them. You know, so you kind of have to help these coaches get out of their own way at times, even if those rookies are actually better than some of the veterans. But generally, that's not the case. But you're seeing a concerted effort to play someone like Jeremiah Fears. And I think you'll see him in the rotation to start the year. The Pelicans have a tough start to the schedule. Could they have gone and gotten a Russell Westbrook kind of guy if Willie Green was like, I need that guy on the team? Yeah, he just signed with the Sacramento Kings and plays a similar-ish style to Jeremiah Fears. and frankly, could be better than Fierce this year. But you've got to play Fierce. You need to develop that, even if he's costing you games. And it looks like Willie Green's going to do that. And I think that's an important piece of growth. Whether that comes from Joe Dumars or something else, that's something that is notable. That is different. And if what we're saying here is you can't just keep doing all of the same things. Well, they're not in terms of that. We'll see if it like remains in the regular season. Preseason, the stakes aren't as high, so you can play guys whatever you want. So we'll see if that changes. It easily could. But you're seeing something there. You know, the other sign to me that things are going to be different, and this is going back to what Sam Quinn said over at CBS Sports, where he's like, well, I couldn't get Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson to coexist. I don't know if anyone is going to be able to do that. You know, I've talked a lot about the Brandon Ingram situation, let's call it. You know, they brought in James Borrego to run a specific style of offense, and Brandon Ingram didn't want to do that. Like, it's truthfully that simple. If the player isn't going to go and do what you want on the court, like, your whole offensive system might really fall apart. It mucks up spacing. It doesn't mean guys can kind of execute in the way that you want. That happened for the past 2 years with Brandon Ingram. He plays the way he wants to play, right? Like, look at how much effort it took to get him to shoot more threes, which he did in the limited games that he played last year. They've been begging him, encouraging him, coaching him to do that, and he just wouldn't do it. So they haven't been able to run the kind of offense. So when you see that third quarter against Houston, you're like, oh, it's just a slog again. The half-court offense is bad, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you know, and it's like, oh, it's like years past. I mean, maybe, but years past were due to the players you had not really executing the game plan and doing all that. So you had to kind of throw that game plan out, and you couldn't kind of revolutionize things like you wanted, because I don't want to say guys were going rogue, but you get the larger point that I'm trying to make here. That's not an ideal situation for a head coach to be in. That shouldn't be a problem this year. The players seem to really be bought into what the team is trying to do. They seem to understand their roles, and you have guys that maybe are just like, yeah, we're going to do what we're coached to do and what we're told to do. And that's kind of what you're looking for here. That hasn't always been the case with this team, for better or worse. So things might be a little bit different. You don't have, I don't want to say Brandon Ingram was derailing the offense or anything like that, because he wasn't. He's a talented player, but they weren't doing what, you know, they had hoped to be doing. Yeah, that's not going to look great on head coach Willie Green. It's going to mean everything kind of just gets thrown off here, and there's no semblance of a cohesive identity or offense because the players aren't doing what the identity should be. So maybe, I don't want to say it's addition by subtraction. Brandon Ingram is an extremely talented basketball player. But maybe the fit's just going to be better, and it allows them to do the other things that they want to do that they haven't been able to do before. And I do think that is going to be a factor into it. So there are some signs that things could be different. You want to give Willie Green a fair shot to start the year. The leash should be real short. Seat should be hot. But there's ways to get that seat a little bit cooler, right? It doesn't have to remain hot. Not if you're winning. He can show growth. He can show the things he needs to do. Figure out the offense, you know, get them playing good defense, which I think they'll be able to do. And you even saw glimpses of it when they started that comeback in the fourth quarter. You know, it's Jeremiah Fears against backups. So I don't know if we want to read too much into it, but it's at least kind of the start of things. And so that can be a little bit encouraging. So I think there are signs that coaching is going to be different this year. And look, healthy Zion, bought in Zion, that really changes a whole lot just by itself. So that's also an encouraging sign here. Coming up next, something that's not encouraging. Injuries already. We're already up to injuries here. I didn't mean to like ASMR and whisper into the mic here. There's injuries. I want to get back to perception. I'll give you an update on Kevon Looney, what we expect, how it's going to impact the roster here, and what the team needs to do, but also that this speaks to something larger. And that's something the Pelicans are going to need to address. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Wayfair. The holidays are going to be here before you know it, and that's really exciting. But getting your home ready for guests and celebrations can feel like a lot. So maybe your serving utensils and ware needs a refresh, or the guest room could use new bedding. Wayfair has everything you need to get your home holiday ready. From Christmas trees and wreaths to bedding, cookware, outdoor inflatables, it's your one-stop shop for every room in the house. Wayfair makes it easy to personalize your home for the holidays with a huge selection for every style and budget. And with free and easy delivery, even on big stuff, you can get everything you need without the hassle of huge delivery fees or needing a truck. Moved a couple times, especially recently. Everything comes from Wayfair. I don't have a big truck. I can't go to the store and lug things around. Free shipping. They can bring it right to your door. It just makes life so much easier with Wayfair. So I love that. It's just a lifesaver, especially during a busy time of year. And I love how easy it is to find pieces that fit my style and budget. And you can do it all in one place, and it just makes checkout a breeze. So get organized, refreshed, and ready for the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season's officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games, especially when hope is high. But let's be real, buying tickets can be a pain. So between waiting in queues, surprise fees, prices that jump before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. So that's where Game Time comes in. It's the app that gives the fans the advantage, your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets, fast, easy, and stress-free. Look, whenever everyone wants to go to the home opener now to see Zion Williamson and how good he looks, I tell everyone to go to Wayfair. Everyone's like, can you get me tickets? No, I can't. Sorry, go to Game Time, not Wayfair. Go to Game Time. That is my go-to ticketing app. I love that what you see is what you pay, no hidden fees at checkout. And if you're going to a place you haven't been before, you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you get exactly what you want. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That is code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Tap, swipe, ticket, go with Game Time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen. Today and every day, we are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. If you're a second listen, it's Locked On Saints with host Ross Jackson, breaking down everything black and gold. Spencer Rattler worth building around? I'm not so sure. Ross Jackson's going to give you insight into his play and the trade deadline and everything you need to know about the New Orleans Saints over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, we got a bad update. Kevon Looney out injured for the New Orleans Pelicans with a proximal tibiofibular ligament sprain in his left knee. The game occurred during the Pelicans preseason game against the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix on October 5th. Looney will be reevaluated in 2 to 3 weeks, and further updates will be provided as appropriate. Are you freaking kidding me? Kevon Looney has been an Iron Man. Basically an Iron Man for the past 5 years. He's played in 85% of all the games over those seasons. And then he comes to New Orleans and immediately is going to miss the start of the year and be reevaluated in 2 to 3 weeks. This is annoying, right? It just makes you feel like it is the same old Pelicans here. I'll hold that thought here in a minute. This is going to impact Yves Missi. It's going to mean he's going to start. I think Missi has looked better than Looney. And again, it's barely anything to be able to actually say that right now. They've barely played. I've liked what we've seen from Missi as a play finisher, as a guy that can do a little bit of offensive creation for you too, as a short roll man where he can still pass the ball. All of that to me has actually been pretty encouraging, what I've seen from him here. However, I worry about defensive rebounding. The Pelicans had a 65% defensive rebounding rate against the Houston Rockets the other day. That's not bad. That's bad. Houston Rockets rebounded 35.3% of their own misses. That would have led the league by far. That'd be the worst defensive rebounding the rate by far for the Pelicans if that was the case last season. You need to end those possessions. Someone was looking at the raw rebounding numbers, and that doesn't tell you the whole story. Saw that comment too. You've got to look at the percentages. The Pelicans did a bad job on the defensive glass, Losing Looney, who would help you with that, not great. It means Missi is going to need to be more aggressive on the defensive glass. I think he's got everything else there. He needs that part. This is going to be his chance to show it. Otherwise, rebounding is going to be a problem, and that's really going to hurt the New Orleans Pelicans, and that could derail the start of their year, which is tough already, and then derail the whole year, which is not what we want. I don't think the Pelicans are going to be active on the trade market trying to get somebody. I don't think you do that right now. I think you roll with Missi and see what he can give you and commit as a team defensive rebounding team. We'll see what ends up happening, but this is a blow. Whether Looney was going to start or not, this is a blow to the team because he was going to be that rotation. We're still waiting on an update with Karlo Makovic and what that injury looked like. So more to come here, but Looney being out to start the year is just, come on. Of course a healthy guy comes here and gets hurt. It's the New Orleans Pelicans, right? It makes you think like a curse is real. But that's where I want to get into this, right? This team needs to work on changing the perception, because when this happens, everyone's immediate thing is like, yep, of course, this is what happens to players here. They've got to change this perception. Whether that's, look, I'm not advocating for people to be fired. I know all these people. I'm not saying that. This is nothing personal. They need to do something to change the perception. If you go through another injury-plagued season, they need to make massive changes in that area just to say we're trying and we're doing something. Whether those folks are actually at fault or not, they need to have this perception changed around the team. There need to be bigger changes, bigger shakeups that you can kind of just see and be like, cool, they're not comfortable with the same old, same old. And this injury to Looney, which again, injuries in the middle of games are not something you can necessarily control. We don't know exactly how this happened. It could be something that is just not preventable at all. But man, it's just every year it's something like this, right? Queen's injury in Summer League, there's nothing anyone could have done about that. You just got to do something, though, that is like, at least they changed things. That's important. Changing the perception around this franchise is massively important, in my opinion. This kind of reinforces it a little bit more. What do you think? You excited for Missi to start? Do you think this is a big deal? Do you think they should trade for another center? Let me know in the comments down below. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be back with you all tomorrow to recap the game.